I should have known something was wrong when Diana Matthews insisted on reviewing all the wedding speeches a week before the ceremony. Just to maintain the proper tone, she said, her perfectly manicured hands smoothing her channel dress. We can't have anything inappropriate at the country club. By inappropriate, I knew she meant my family, the working class people she'd spent the last 2 years subtly degrading at every opportunity, especially my father, who had raised me alone after Mom died, driving his truck across the country to put me through college. Your dad's speech, Diana said during our final wedding planning meeting, her nose wrinkling as she held my father's handwritten pages like they might contaminate her. It's rather quaint, isn't it? I bit my tongue, something I'd gotten good at since getting engaged to her son James. Dad spent weeks working on it. She set the papers aside. Well, we'll see what we can do to make it more suitable. I should have pressed her on what that meant. I should have insisted she return the speech right then. But James had begged me to keep the peace until after the wedding. Mom's just set in her ways, he'd say. Once we're married, things will settle down. What I didn't tell James was that I'd been investigating his mother for months. It started when I overheard her at the nursing home where her mother, James's grandmother, Eleanor, was staying. I had gone to deliver some paperwork Diana had forgotten to sign, only to hear her voice drifting from behind a partially closed door. Just sign here, Mother, Diana was saying. It's nothing important, just some routine paperwork for your care. Something in her tone made me pause. I'd worked as a paralegal long enough to recognize when someone was trying to hide something. I pulled out my phone and started recording, a habit from my job when something felt off. But the house? Eleanor's voice was weak. Your siblings. Don't worry about them. Diana's voice hardened. I'm taking care of everything, just like I always have. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I'd recorded dozens of conversations, each more damning than the last. Diana hadn't just convinced her dying mother to sign over her estate. She had systematically cut out her 3 siblings, forged documents, and hidden away millions in assets that should have been shared. I kept the recordings safe, telling myself they were insurance. Protection against a woman who'd made it clear she thought I was beneath her son. I never planned to use them, until today. The wedding was everything Diana had planned: elaborate flower arrangements, crystal champagne flutes, and 300 of Boston's finest families. My side of the aisle looked sparse in comparison, just Dad and a handful of close friends. I watched my father fidget with his tie, the same one he'd worn to my high school graduation. He'd been so proud when he showed me his speech, words he'd worked on during long hauls across the country. It's not fancy, he'd said, but it's from the heart. The reception started perfectly, according to Diana's carefully orchestrated schedule. Then came time for the speeches. There's been a small change, Diana announced, standing at the microphone. Since we want to keep things elegant, I'll be giving the father of the bride's speech. The crystal champagne flute nearly slipped from my hand. Across the room, my father's face crumpled in confusion. What is she talking about? James whispered beside me. Before I could respond, Diana pulled out a stack of papers, not my father's worn pages, but crisp, typed sheets. As the mother of the groom, and someone who understands the proper way to address such a gathering, I watched in horror as she pulled my father's speech from her purse and deliberately tore it in half. A truck driver's sentiment, while sweet, isn't quite appropriate for this venue, she said into the microphone, drawing awkward laughs from her side of the room. My father stood up quietly, heading for the door. The same quiet dignity he'd shown every time Diana had insulted him, every time she'd made it clear he wasn't good enough for her world. Something in me snapped. Stop, my voice cut through the room. I stood up, my hands shaking but my voice steady. You don't get to do this. Diana's perfect smile faltered. Sarah, dear, sit down. You're causing a scene. No, you caused a scene when you decided to humiliate my father. I walked to where she stood, pulling out my phone. You want to talk about what's appropriate? Let's talk about what's appropriate. Sarah? James had followed me, confusion written across his face. What are you doing? Showing everyone who your mother really is. I turned to address the room. Before I play this, I want to apologize to James's aunts and uncles, who I know aren't here today. Now I understand why Diana's face went pale. You don't know what you're talking about. The first recording filled the elegant ballroom, Eleanor's frail voice echoing through the speakers. Diana, you promised the lake house would go to Robert. Mother, we've discussed this. Diana's recorded voice cut in, sharp and commanding. Robert doesn't deserve the lake house. Not after he sided with Dad during the divorce. I watched Diana's face transform from sophisticated country club matron to something altogether more dangerous. But I continued playing the recordings, each one more damning than the last. Just sign here. Diana's voice continued. The medication makes it hard to read anyway, doesn't it? I'll handle everything. James gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles white. Around the room, guests shifted uncomfortably. Wine glasses frozen halfway to lips, forks suspended over untouched wedding cake. Sarah, Diana's voice was eerily calm. Turn that off right now. Instead, I switched to another recording, this one from just 2 weeks ago. Everything's almost done, Diana was saying to someone. Once Eleanor passes, no one can contest it. The money's already been moved offshore. Robert, Anne, and Mary won't see a penny of their inheritance. That's what they get for being ungrateful children. My God, someone whispered from the crowd. I recognized Mrs. Henderson, Diana's bridge partner. That's why Eleanor changed her will. Diana lunged for my phone, but James caught her arm. Mom, stop. His voice cracked. Is this true? Of course not. Diana's laugh was brittle. This gold digger clearly doctored these recordings. She's trying to ruin our family's reputation. Like you ruined your siblings, I challenge. Should we play the part where you laugh about Robert losing his house? Or how about when you forge Anne's signature on the property transfer? From the back of the room, my father stepped forward. In his hands were the torn pieces of his speech. I may be just a truck driver, he said quietly, but at least I earned every dollar I have honestly. Diana's perfectly composed mask finally cracked. You have no idea what it takes to maintain our position in society. The country club memberships, the charity boards, the right schools. It all costs money. Money that wasn't yours to take, James said. His face had gone ashen. That's why Aunt Mary wouldn't come to the wedding. Why Uncle Robert stopped talking to us years ago. They were weak, Diana spat. Your grandfather built an empire, and they would have squandered it on their middle-class lifestyles and public schools. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see James's world crumbling as every childhood memory was rewritten with this new understanding. How much? He asked quietly. How much did you steal from them? I answered before Diana could lie. 2.3 million. Plus the lake house, the summer cottage, and your grandfather's art collection. I have all the documentation. You little bitch, Diana hissed. You've been investigating me this whole time? No, I corrected her. I started recording the day I heard you manipulating your dying mother. Everything else I discovered because you were so convinced of your own superiority that you got sloppy. Diana turned to the stunned crowd, her society friends and connections of 30 years. You don't understand. Eleanor was going to split everything equally, all that wealth divided 4 ways. I worked the hardest. I maintained our social position. I deserved. To steal from your own mother, James's voice was ice. To destroy your siblings' lives. I did it for you. Diana grabbed James's arm. Everything I did was to ensure you have the best life, the right connections. And you're going to let this truck driver's daughter ruin everything. James pulled away from her grip. The only person ruining everything is you, Mom. Sarah's father might be a truck driver, but he'd never steal from his family. He'd never tear up someone's heartfelt words because they weren't elegant enough. I watched Diana's eyes dart around the room, seeing her carefully constructed world dissolving. Her country club friends were already gathering their purses, making discreet exits. The waiters weren't even pretending not to listen anymore. I'm calling my lawyer, she announced, fumbling for her phone. This is slander. I'll sue you for every penny your father ever earned driving that truck. Actually, I said calmly, I already sent copies of everything to the district attorney's office. They're very interested in the forged documents and the offshore accounts. The color drained from Diana's face. You're bluffing. Like you bluffed to your mother about those routine care documents she was signing? I held up my phone again. Should we play that recording for everyone? Before she could respond, the ballroom doors opened. 2 men in suits entered, followed by a uniformed police officer. Diana Matthews, one of the suits called out. I'm Detective Morrison, We'd like to ask you some questions about your mother's estate. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal depositions and family revelations. Diana was arrested that night, what should have been our wedding reception. The image of her being led out in handcuffs, still wearing her custom-made mother of the groom dress, made the local papers. But it was the aftermath that proved most challenging. James insisted we postpone our honeymoon to deal with the family crisis. His first priority was reaching out to his estranged aunts and uncles. "I should have known something was wrong," he said one night, sitting among boxes of financial records in our apartment. "All those years, Mom said they were jealous of our success, that they chose to cut ties with us. I never questioned it. I found Uncle Robert first, living in a small apartment in Milwaukee. He'd lost his construction business after Diana blocked him from accessing his portion of the family investment funds. Aunt Mary was teaching high school in Florida, having sold her jewelry collection to pay for her daughter's medical bills that should have been covered by her inheritance. Aunt Anne had passed away 2 years ago, never knowing why her mother had seemingly cut her out of the will. The reunions were painful but healing. Robert broke down when James apologized for believing Diana's lies. Mary hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for exposing the truth." Eleanor, still in the nursing home, had moments of clarity when told what Diana had done. "I knew something wasn't right," she said, holding James's hand. But Diana was so insistent, and the medication made everything so fuzzy. The DA's office moved quickly, building a case against Diana that went beyond just the inheritance theft. They uncovered decades of financial manipulation, forged documents, and tax evasion. She'd been skimming from charity funds too, another revelation that shattered her social standing. James insisted on using our wedding fund to help his aunts and uncles with legal fees to reclaim their inheritance. The lake house was returned to Robert, as Eleanor had originally intended. Mary's daughter finally got the medical treatment she needed. My father, true to his nature, stayed above the fray. "All that money," he said, shaking his head, "makes people lose sight of what really matters." 6 months after the failed wedding, we had a simple ceremony in my father's backyard. This time, when Dad stood to give his speech, no one tried to stop him. "I'm just a truck driver," he began, pulling out those same worn pages Diana had torn. "I've spent my life moving other people's precious cargo across this country. But the most precious cargo I ever carried was my daughter. And today, I'm entrusting her to your care, James. Not because of your family name or your bank account, but because you proved you value truth and justice more than social standing." James, who'd grown up hearing only polished country club speeches, wiped tears as my father spoke from his heart. We did eventually find Diana's offshore accounts, all $2.3 million. The money was returned to Eleanor's estate to be divided as originally intended. Diana, facing multiple felony charges, accepted a plea deal, 8 years in prison and full restitution. The last time I saw her was at the sentencing. She'd lost her sophisticated veneer, her designer clothes replaced by a standard jumpsuit, but her final words showed she still didn't understand. "I gave you everything," she told James. "The right connections, the right upbringing. And you threw it all away for what? Some truck driver's concept of justice." James squeezed my hand and replied, "No, Mom. I chose truth over lies, family over fortune, and love over social status. Dad would have been ashamed of what you did." 1 year later, we gathered at the restored lake house for a family reunion, the first in 15 years. Robert's construction business was thriving again. Mary's daughter was healthy and starting college. Eleanor, now living with Robert, was clear-headed enough to enjoy her great-grandchildren playing on the lawn. As I watched James with his reunited family, my father joined me on the porch. "You know what I realized?" he said, gazing at the scene. "All those miles I drove, all those roads I traveled, they were nothing compared to the journey that brought us here." I leaned my head on his shoulder, remembering the torn speech, the recordings, the moment of choice in that elaborate ballroom. "Sometimes," I replied, "the most important cargo we carry is the truth." Inside my pocket, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Diana's appeal had been denied. But looking at the healing family before me, James playing with his cousin's kids, Robert and Mary planning holiday gatherings, Eleanor contentedly watching it all, I realized Diana had already lost something far more valuable than money or social status. She'd lost the chance to understand that real family worth isn't measured in inheritance figures or country club memberships, but in the honest words of a truck driver's speech and the simple truth of love. James caught my eye from the lawn and smiled, the real, unburdened smile of a man who found his way home. And I knew that sometimes the happiest endings don't come from perfect wedding receptions, but from the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted.